Hello! Hello and welcome to this live Doctor Who Missing Episodes podcast. We're going to be discussing the top 10 most wanted stories affected by missing episodes. And just to reiterate what we covered last time, this is based on extensive Twitter polling over a number of months carried out in 2021. Our first live podcast where we discussed numbers 26th to 11th is linked in the notes below. And we're doing these live podcasts to warm up and promote the podcast proper, which will be returning on July the 2nd. But it is available now on our Patreon feed, where you can get a bunch of other perks. Now, I just want to say thank you to all of our patrons and give a shout out to our mighty Kublai Khan patrons, Tony Carroll, Bedweer Gullidge, Jess Jerkovic, Paul Cook, Simon Whitehead, Tim Arding, and Unknown Consciousness. I can see some of you in the feed already. Hello. The live chat feed is interactive, so I can and will bring up some of your comments and discussion as we go. Anyway, that's enough of just me. So let's wheel out the talent. Now, sadly, Paul is visiting the Queen at the O2 Arena or something like that. He said she's going to play loud music at him. But let's say hello to Gav Rymil and
hello.
Lam.
Hello.
Hello. How are you?
How are you both doing?
But okay.
Great. But we have someone else here just for a little while, just for 10 minutes or so. Toby Heydock's turned up. Let's introduce Toby as well while we've got him. Hello, Toby.
Hello. Sorry, I'm actually doing another podcast right now, but I've dipped out. Not a podcaster, an in-person. I don't know what they're called. One of those things where you're on the computer. Anyway, hello. I've popped in. Hello.
Hello.
Great to see you.
Hi.
Great to see you. How's your podcast going, Toby? Because when we had our little break of 2 years, you came along and just completely took over the whole Doctor Who podcast universe. How's that working out for you? All right.
Well, I asked my friend Rob Rouse, who's a comedian, about Patreon and stuff like that, and he said, "Well, I do 5 things a week. I give them something Monday to Friday." So I thought, well, all right, I'll do something 3 times a week because that seems like quite a lot. And Rob has a lot of energy and can get away with doing things like racing his chickens. Because I can't do that. I can't race chickens, and so I came up with 3 different podcasts. So it's keeping me busy. I've tracked down this. I found out what happened to the man from the post office who did the first Dalek test voices for Christopher Barry. I'm quite proud of that.
They are amazing. I'm absolutely hooked on them. They're brilliant. And I just don't know how you churn out so many. It's impossible. But there you go. Thank you so much.
The state of the place behind me is probably because I don't tidy up or do anything else.
Anyway, talk to us because we're here to talk about missing episodes, and I know you've only got a moment or 3. We're here to talk about what we most want back and what people voted for as the most wanted back. So, where are you at with that? What would you be if you could choose 3 but not have any others?
Whole stories is this, or to complete
a story or a whole story just for the sake of getting that serial back?
Yeah. Well, first up, and anybody who has this opportunity and says Web of Fear 3, Reign of Terror 4 and 5, and 10th Planet 4 will be machine gunned to death when I am in charge. I need to have a complete... why am I characterising them like that? I don't know, but it just makes me a wasted opportunity. You've got... You know what it looks like. You know what the performances are like. No, we need something from... Even if you only gave me 3 episodes, I wouldn't choose any from a story that we've already got something from. Not on your Nelly. I want something. I want something, new, and also for sheer weight of numbers. If you're giving me stories, because I quite often play fantasy. What would you do if ever I see a car boot sale? I go, oh, imagine they've got 19 film cans. What do you want them to be? And I always disappoint myself and say 2 of them would be episodes of Tomorrow's World, and just to disappoint myself, and then I'll find. So then I go, I've got 17 episodes. and for some reason I want an even spread across. There's no way that they'd have all ended up in the same van, but they have, an even spread across. So if you're going to give me I thought you were going to give me 5 stories.
Oh, if you want to do 5, Toby.
Well, I'll tell you what, I have 19.
26 if you want. Job done. See you later.
I'm always a bit sad at how badly Mission to the Unknown does on these, by the way, because do people not want to see the delegates? But that's just what I noticed from all of these polls. Mission is always a bit lower than I'd expect. Anyway, let's not get into that. If I was to have, it's a difficult one. I always sort of say because I like the historicals, and I like stories that there's nothing existing from. And I think season 3 is hugely underrated. My default goes to the M's of Mythmakers, Massacre, and Marco Polo, because you get 7. But that's a lot of history, and that's a lot of Hartnell. And Troughton is my favourite Doctor. And Fury from the Deep was my favourite story when I was a kid, largely because it didn't exist, and I had a sense of victimhood even then. It has to be my favourite story. And then there's Power and Evil, of course. So they'd be and that's sad for Macra Terror, but that's my 6 who are kind of fighting it out. I think I will have to go for Mythmakers, Massacre, and Power of the Daleks.
Mythmakers.
And I'm not going for Power because it's a landmark story. I don't care that it's Troughton's first story. That doesn't bother me so much. And in fact, I get more excited when the story itself. I always like the fact that Doctor Who gives us a new story, a new set of characters, a new setting, a new feel. So I'm not that interested in Troughton's first moments. Bizarrely, I don't know why. That's just how I'm wired. But Power is, irrespective of it being Troughton's first story, where he makes some very wayward decisions on occasion. Not as good as some as he would have made, but let's not get into that. Power is a really good story, full stop. And Mythmakers is hugely underrated and really funny. And Massacre is just like a brilliant sort of stage play. I love it. And smartly done. And it's got the thing of Hartnell playing. I mean, he doesn't do it for very long. I mean, the Abbot of Amboise isn't actually in episode 2 apart from the recap. So, I mean, he's not in it that much, but Peter Purvis is great. It's got Quatermass in it. And it's a story that I think is really, really strong and good and would benefit from being seen. I would hope an Enemy of the World would happen to the Mythmakers and the Massacre if they turned up. Probably wouldn't, because I find quite often I'm out of sync with what Doctor Who fans like. But those 3 then, yes.
But you're therefore binning the 9 episodes of 8 episodes. How many? 9 episodes of Daleks Master Plan, Toby.
Yeah, and do you know what? I would have gone, and then I did it recently for my podcast and really, really liked it. I mean, if I was to have, if I was to do my game of having, 17 installments in a car boot sale, I'd definitely get the last couple of episodes of Master Plan, because you need to see the delegates in. Well, I'd need episode 3 as well, because I've got a theory about the delegates appearing in that, and that people that are listed on the cast list as playing convicts are not. But we won't waste your time with that.
Sounds interesting, though.
But if they are, it means we've got delegates in episode 3 played by actors who don't play the delegates in any of the other episodes. So that means we're missing pictures of and footage that we also don't have of the other people. We're missing footage upon footage. But I'd certainly like episodes 11 and 12 of Master Plan, just because they're an epic ending, and it is a great story. I could take or leave some of the middle ones, to be honest. That one, is it Volcano, where the Doctor literally does an "I'll tell you later" with his ring. And it's just lots of yelling on a planet. It's just lots of yelling at Peter Butterworth on a planet. I'm not sure I mind if but it does. That one has the cricket in it, doesn't it? Does that one have the cricket in it?
Mm.
Yeah. Oh, see.
Trafalgar Square.
Yeah.
Mm.
Oh, you see, there's always something. It's hard. You do tell me when I finally choose my favourite 3, then dangle another in front of me and go, "You're going to let this burn forever."
I was just thinking about that ring business in Volcano, because the Doctor does the thing and opens the lock and doesn't want to explain it, and then the writer. Who wrote this one, Gav?
Dennis
Spooner. Even has Stephen try to get him to explain again, and then has Stephen drop it as well. It's like he's wrestling with his
Stephen's there going, trying to work out what coronas of the sun are. I don't know what that's referring to. It's. I mean, I sort of want everyone to reassure me that they're all going to come back, but they're not, are they? It's very sad.
2013, Toby.
I do have a theory that actually part of the fact that there are missing. I'm sure you've discussed this a lot. The fact that there are missing episodes is actually part of what makes it tantalizing. The fact that we have something to pore over and theorize over that we can't see, in a way, means we're lucky. If you're a sort of, if you're like, it's like you're a part of a self-flagellating religion, isn't it? We like this because we suffer. This makes us holy. Sorry, I've
every time
I'm so sorry.
Every time I hear Tim talk about the situations with Master Plan, it always makes me really optimistic, because the summary that you basically do is that pretty much 50% of this story was definitely in the country in the 70s, and of those we've now definitely got 2, 5, and 10. Got clips of 3 and 4. It just feels like it's just out of reach rather than, gone forever. So I remain pretty optimistic about Master Plan on a daily basis.
Yeah, we've received so much of it back. It just seems like we're close, even though we're obviously really not.
Yeah, because when I was a Time Tot, it was one of those that had none by it in the episode's existing column. In fact, I took a pencil to my Doctor Who celebration and crossed out none and put 5 and 10. It's a very silly thing to. I also crossed out 10th Planet bar 4 because I believed that Doctor Who magazine April Fools. And it's fair to say I think 5 and 10, apart from Volcano, 5 and 10 are probably the weakest episodes, actually.
I really love them both.
Let's take the Christmas out of the equation. You like them, do you? You're a big fan.
I do. They both make satisfying temporary individual watching experiences. If you're not going to be able to watch the whole story, they've both got something that feels like a conclusion to that episode. So when you sit down for 25 odd minutes, you feel like you've had a good time, which is, if you're going to watch an Orphan, that's one of the things to go for, I think.
That's a good point. That's very true.
Toby, do you have I know you rattled some off, but Matthew there, he's asked, what's your least wanted?
Well, that's a tricky one, because it has to be said, as Underwater Menace 2 proved, every missing installment has loads of things that we'd only imagine or couldn't imagine, certainly with Troughton's performance. And I had all sorts of images of what Professor Zaroff's octopus would be like, and it turned out it wasn't like he wasn't referring to his octopus, because he clearly couldn't afford one. So he talks about his octopus and then talks about his fish in a tank, which I'm sure is not what Jeffrey Orme expected, and certainly wasn't what. Oh, he's not talking about an octopus. So there's all sorts of things about what compromises the production made and what the paperwork doesn't tell us. And I think my least favourite story amongst the missing stories, and possibly most nearly ever, is Celestial Toymaker. But I still think there would be loads to see in those episodes, and especially as the episode we have doesn't have Carmen Sylvia and Campbell Singer in it, who spend the whole story playing different characters. So I even if it was one of the episodes of Celestial Toymaker, I would go, well, we would still be seeing bits that we haven't had experience of. I suppose if I had to have I suppose it's a hard one. I suppose the ones we probably need the least are the missing episodes of the Ice Warriors, the missing. Though I do quite like the Ice Warriors coming out of the ice, you see, or the missing episode. I was going to say Galaxy 4, which is not as good a story, but we haven't even really got the full size Rills, which we have in episode 4. But I would probably say, because the Space Pirates isn't great, but there's so much we don't know about it. There's no telesnaps we can't see. if we started watching episode 1 of the Space Pirates, we'd feel like we'd watched 97 episodes. Turned up. I mean, it's just
you'll upset Gavin.
Yeah, well, I mean, come on. Episode 1 of the Space Pirates it's basically General Hermack telling his spaceship everything they already know forever, because playing Doctor Who's a bit tired and doesn't want to do too much this week. So I've given a very long answer there. I think we've got enough of the Ice Warriors, even though I love that season. So that I'll cheat by saying that.
Okay.
Somebody there said they thought the Space Pirates was very good. I could be wrong.
We did a chat the other day, and there was a lot of love for the Space Pirates, and I can't remember quite where it finished, but it was really high on the returns. I think on the wanted returns up to 11. You get 5 episodes, don't you? And we've got a load of missing visuals, but you're right about part 1 for sure.
Yeah, but the later stuff and the fact we have no photos of Domi Sigri, and it's an excellent cast on paper, the Space Pirates, and obviously all that spaceship stuff is brilliant. So, it's only when I say it's not up there, it's not without. It's only the last child I'd go into the burning building for, maybe, but rather than I like all Doctor Who.
I've been watching it more than ever because it's my least familiar Simpsons score. The music's really good in the Space Pirates. It's excellent, unforgotten, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, how are you doing for time, Toby?
Oh yeah, I could probably give you a couple more minutes, but I've realised I've not stopped talking. Sorry.
Well, no, that's absolutely groovy. So, what's coming up in your podcast then? We need to let you plug that properly. And where can we find it?
Toby Heydock's Time Travels on all the usual outlets. What is coming up is I've just finished Richard Bignell and Pyramids of Mars, which means coming up I have Michael Dennis, who wrote one of the Queers monologues for Mark Gatiss' thing, eulogising the Macra Terror. And so it's a missing Troughton that we both like very much, and I'm halfway through. I'm near the end of the Daleks with my Too Much Information podcast, and the next Indefinable Magic is all about alcohol in Doctor Who and other related issues. So I do 3 different podcasts. They're all quite positive and jolly. One is deeply factual, one is whimsical, and one is an episode commentary that accentuates the positive.
Which, obviously, the commentaries are the quickest to knock out.
Yeah.
Which takes longer, the whimsical essays or the factual... it's going to be the factual deep dive.
Yeah, I have to be in the right mood for the whimsical essays. Sometimes I try and write them and they just don't go anywhere. And sometimes they flow quite well. So that's a case of timing. But the Too Much Information ones is painstaking, just going through... file after file after file after file, and in the case of the paperwork for the Daleks, file after file that's mixed up with other files that's in the wrong order, and does your head in. So for patrons, I'm just doing Edge of Destruction, which is much easier because there's almost no paperwork at all. So I don't quite know how we're going to fill the time with that one, but let's see. Because patrons are much further ahead than the Great Unwashed. And I can see a lot of my patrons amongst your patrons. So the Doctor Who internet community is supported by a small number of very lovely people.
Sure. Too Much Info is superb.
Yeah, everyone likes the one that takes the longest.
Steve White, love all 3 podcasts.
Thanks, Steve.
Toby, appreciate the hard work.
Well, what else would I be doing? The Queen's had more screen acting work this year than I have. She's not even a member of Equity. Right. Well, I'll let you get on with your thing. Sorry, I dominated.
Well, Toby, thank you so much for popping in. That was awesome and a nice surprise, which I've known about for a few hours. But yeah, absolutely brilliant. What I'll do, I'll stick your links and stuff in the YouTube notes when we're done, and then people can find your stuff. And
for patrons, the next commentary I'm doing, a certain Gavin Rymil has chosen Silver Nemesis for me to
eulogize. You loved every second of it, didn't you?
Yeah.
You texted me to say how much you were enjoying it. And you were going to rewatch it immediately after you finished.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's something like that.
Yeah.
Paraphrasing.
Yeah.
All right then, Toby. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Nice
Thanks
to see
for coming.
You. All right. Bye.
Bye.
That was amazing.
He's good. He's top man.
Right. What are we doing?
Are we doing the subscriber giveaway?
What subscriber giveaway is that, Anthony?
Well, I'll tell you what, Gavin. What's happening is if you like and subscribe to this channel, like this video and subscribe to this channel, one lucky subscriber will be picked, probably at random. Tim's doing it, and you're going to win some prints of my pictures, which I think Tim's going to probably pop up on the screen here.
Oh, I thought they were photographs you sent me.
Oh, I'm afraid not. No. They're from 60s Dalek stories, so they're relevant to this podcast and the channel's activities. Yeah, all A4 except for the chase one, which is a square, because that's how it is.
That Dalek's missing its gun there.
I know. I was going to fix it, but I like antagonizing you, so I left it.
The detail on these is just extraordinary. I love how you can see the wooden return inside the gun box in that hole in the previous picture.
So I think, Tim, did you say people have like 3 days to just like and subscribe and stuff, and then a winner will be chosen?
Yeah, what I think I'll do is at midday British summertime on Thursday the 9th. We'll draw 3 winners and then post those off. But you have to be subscribed and you have to have liked the video, and that's absolutely superb, Ant. Thank you so much.
Oh, no worries.
Will you squiggle on the back for people?
I will. Yeah, I can
because you're
squiggle
like
all sorts on there.
mega famous.
Draw a picture of you and Gavin on there, or something. I mean, I won't do that because
no, Jess, you don't need to unsubscribe and subscribe again. Bedweir, seriously, that isn't a photograph.
Crazy, isn't it?
It is. Unknown consciousness. Those are incroyable.
I tell you what, just in reply to Jess, if you do have other Google accounts and you subscribed on those as well, it would increase your chances of winning, and it would make us very happy.
Boost the subscribers.
I take it Rob Moss is doing that to the photographs and not one of us, but
no, I take it that it's for us.
Probably you. Yeah.
He's always complaining, isn't he, Kieran Hyman? Moan.
So it comes in black and white as well, though. I did black and white because I'm not totally, devoid of authenticity.
You should give a black and white one to Clay Hickman to colorize.
I think I will.
Anthony, that's superb. Thank you very much. So just once again, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and then at midday British summertime on the Thursday, we'll pick a winner, or 3 winners rather, and we'll get those shipped off to you. But the shipping is going to take a little while because Anthony's off on his jolly bobs and is back on the 13th or thereabouts.
We're going to a secret location together.
We are. It's going to be lovely.
Is it Wigan?
A little remote cottage.
Might be. So just to clarify, people don't have to like the video as in enjoy it. You can hate the video as long as you click the like button, just to be clear.
If you hated it, maybe leave a comment.
You could, your comment could be that you hate the video, but as long as you click the like button, you've fulfilled the criteria.
We've really upset Richard Smith. Richard Smith is Gavin's other podcast boss. He rules with a rod of iron. And Richard's been really upset that we weren't doing cartwheels last time about the moon base, but
it's not our opinions, though, is it? It's the opinions of the general public.
It's your opinion.
I am actually feeling slightly sorry for what I said about the Ice Warriors. It's possibly better than I made out. It's got some lovely shots, some lovely scenes.
Don't be.
Mm.
Well, also, we're not necessarily being negative about the story. It's just a question of how excited we'd be about those episodes. And I watched the existing Moonbase episodes to death. Always since they came out on the Cybermen years. I absolutely love those episodes. But what we're missing, I'm not so desperate about that I would necessarily put it any higher. I think we've got a really good 50% representation, including the final episode. First and last episodes, always good.
Certainly now we've got the animation. That's a good sit-down watch experience.
It's a very good animation as well. Yeah.
Sure. Okay, the top 10. So just to reiterate, this was polled a lot in 2021. We had hundreds upon hundreds of votes. It was a World Cup structure. So we got the first one, and then we got the second one and the third one, and so on and so forth. So I'm fairly comfortable that this represents a good spectrum of opinion. Now, if you want to find out, if you weren't watching the other day when we did it, what came 26th to 11th, we did another live podcast the other day, which is still up on the feed, so you can go and check those out. If you're not aware what came there, then you might be shouting out for things which have already been ruled out, like the Web of Fear, etc. 3 winners. Yes, Bedweir. We'll send 1 print to 1 person. So we've got 3 prints to give away. We'll pick 3 and then send the prints out at random. So what we're going to do this time as well is, because we didn't really have time last time, and I know it's a popular bit of the podcast, is it's normally the poll section, but I'll try and do it this time, is we'll talk about a little bit about these stories and whether there's any possibility that they might come up. But I'll do that at the end when we've done our little round robin about each story. I'll go through some facts about them, and it might be of interest, and we'll see how that goes. So in 10th place. So 11th was the Smugglers. Finishing in 10th place, the 10th most wanted story, The Highlanders.
I re-listened to this recently and really enjoyed it.
I was really shocked, Gav, because when you listened to it, you commented, I think privately, at one point, I don't think you're being sarcastic. You said it's the best Doctor Who you've ever heard or something.
I am prone to a bit of hyperbole when I get very excited about things. I did once declare that Transformers was the best film I'd ever seen. But
1986 one, obviously.
No, whatever's. Anyway, The Highlanders, I was enjoying it so much. And I, for years, I only ever watched the loose cannon reconstructions. But recently, and this is no disrespect to loose cannon whatsoever, I've become more preoccupied with sort of the realities of the visuals rather than the speculation, if that makes sense. So if there was a much maligned, I think, recon recently that was all telesnaps and nothing else, and the telesnaps were in sequence and only shown on screen for the moments that they were relevant to. So there was no repetition, there was no recycling, and no putting telesnaps in the wrong order just so there was something on screen. And apparently it didn't go down very well. But I like that approach, although it's not very watchable, because I'm now at the stage where I'm just sort of hyper obsessed with the visuals. Anyway, that's a long rambling way of saying I listened to it just completely devoid of any visuals, focusing on just the audio. and trying to picture exactly what was going on and reconstructing it in my head. And it was really exciting. Really enjoyed it. Sorry, that was a very rambling answer, wasn't it?
Got a lovely voice.
Are you familiar with it, Ant?
I am. I've listened to it a couple of times. I would actually really like to see it. Like I've said, listening to it with the audio alone, your mind really gets going to try and visualize what you're missing. But in this case, I think we're missing lots of location work, some great performances. I mean, maybe it's not lots of location work. You guys probably know better than I do.
A fair bit.
Yeah. And yeah, the performances, it's early Troughton, and obviously we're sorely lacking on that point. So I would absolutely love to see it again.
It's a funny one for me. Not that I don't think it's good, but it's a funny story, isn't it? Because Troughton is wild in it. It's just a different dress up every episode, and it's one of those which I find hard to absorb. If you ask me to lay out the plot points for you and what happened in every episode, I'd really struggle. I could do Power of the Daleks, chapter and verse, but the Highlanders always has this slight intangibility. It's definitely one of those. I love the concept and the idea and the historical, and I love comedy in Doctor Who, especially early Doctor Who. But it's that weird early Troughton, isn't it?
I feel the same, Tim, about the lack of tangibility, and that's one of the reasons I would actually like to see it, because I think if we watch it as it was intended, it would rasterize somewhat in our minds. I think it would be a better experience.
Sure.
I think there's a surprising amount of. I mean, last time I was saying that by and large historicals work as audio fine, and therefore I worry about not seeing them less. If that sentence made any sense. But I think the Highlanders, I'll contradict myself on that, because I think it's a really visual story, like you say, with the Troughton dressing up and the prison, the underground prison cell, and the location footage. There's just lots of interesting stuff that I would like to see. And
it's unanimatable. If that's the word, so we're told, because tartan is impossible to animate, and it's one of those. I think that if people knew more about it, they'd miss it less. So arguably, if there was some sort of visual commercial release of it, you could see it dropping down, couldn't you? The same with the Smugglers. That's another slightly intangible one, and maybe one or two.
I find the Massacre similar, actually, but
sure, yeah. Anthony Carroll, was it the first story junked? It was the first story to have its tapes wiped. Yeah. So let's see how this goes then, because we need to get a little bit fact-based, and I thought that was a good way of segueing into it. Ollie Perry asks if it was sold anywhere. So what I want to do is, as I mentioned, I want to talk about the likelihood of something being found, but we need to remember, when I say, it's not likely or it is likely, we're after a minor miracle at this stage anyway. We've not had anything found for over 10 years since any missing Doctor Who was found anyway. But if we look at the facts, we can perhaps identify some what I would call not impossibles, rather than just not likelies, rather than completely not going to happen. So just a recap for anyone who might not be familiar with this sort of territory. All Doctor Who videotapes from which transmissions were made have gone. They were wiped. They were reused. So no black and white Doctor Who exists on videotape. Every single bit of black and white Doctor Who that we have, and plenty of it, exists on film that has been found over the years. And any found Doctor Who now primarily relies on ex-sales prints being found. So BBC Enterprises made sales prints, shipped them off around the world, and they were passed from country to country. So apart from other undocumented freak sort of possibilities, like, I don't know, prints made for review, like that episode of Terry Thomas that was turned up recently. It shouldn't exist, but they found that they made a copy for review. But we can't know about that. We can't speculate about that because it's just not documented. So any Doctor Who now relies on ex-sales prints turning up, in my simple way of thinking about it. Now, either they have to be found overseas in a TV station in Nigeria or wherever, or they have to be returned to the UK. And essentially, when they were returned to the UK, if they were returned to the UK in the 70s, they were junked, tossed into a skip, and essentially stolen. So in 2004, when Day of Armageddon was found, it's a bit of a different case, but that was essentially stolen. And the guy fessed up 30 years later. And in 2011, when Airlock and the Underwater Menace Part 2 were found, they had been junked by the BBC and picked out of a skip, but they had to have been there for them to be stolen. So my questions when approaching this are, one, could they have been found in an overseas TV station? Well, however unlikely it is that Philip Morris, who found Enemy and Web 10 years ago, has found more either before 2013 or since 2013, it's not impossible. So I'm going to call those not impossibles. It's not likely that someone will find stuff and sit on it for years and years and years, but it's not impossible. And Paul and I will do another one of these to discuss rumours. And I think we'll probably talk about that one in some great depth. So I'm not trying to invoke the spirit of 2013. All I'm saying is it's not impossible that the guy's got stuff. And we might be able to identify what those might likely be, judging by where things were last shown and where he says he's been. The other thing we can look at, and there is a little bit of paperwork on this, is what was sent back to the BBC in the 70s. And if it was in the same batch as those two episodes, which we know were junked and sent back in 75, then there's a possibility that they didn't just take 2 cans, that they took an armful of cans. And therefore, if we know films were sent back with those, there's a possibility they might exist with private collectors 50 years on, not made it to landfill, and that they might be out there. So I hope, sorry to go on about that, but they're my sort of rules of engagement. So let's look at the evidence available for each story. So first up, the Highlanders. And just let me get rid of that. So the Highlanders is nice and straightforward. It's not looking good. First broadcast in Australia in 1967. There's paperwork to say it was junked. Now, Australia's funny because there's evidence they made their own prints as well. So there could be multiple copies floating around, or could have been, but they also seem pretty efficient at junking stuff. So if they had multiple copies, they could have all ended up at the same place and had a bandsaw run through them. So we can forget about the Australian copy of the Highlanders. New Zealand, they broadcast it in 1969. They have paperwork saying they junked it in 1974, went to landfill with the Lion. It was also shown in Uganda, Singapore, and Hong Kong. Film prints moved around, and it was a set of film prints showed up in Zambia in 1970. Now, Phil Morris said he went to Zambia and there was nothing there. So, on those metrics that I spell out laboriously, just on those metrics, I don't think it's likely as other things that we'll ever get to see the Highlanders. But who knows, eh? Gavin Ant, was that clear?
I think so.
Yeah.
Great.
sure Paul will say in the comments if there's any questions.
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't look at the comments. Let's just have a little look-see. Why is Jamie chasing a red coat at the end of the War Games? They forgot how that story had ended. That's true. I don't think they were too obsessed with continuity in those days. There's a funny thing that happens with the censor clips is I only need to see like 3 seconds, and then when I'm imagining it, when I'm listening to it, I can sort of imagine it in that black and white scratchy image, the whole thing. The research necessary to make these deductions is overwhelming to me. You guys are brilliant. Well, Jess, that's really kind of you. But what I've done is go on to the amazing site Broadcast, which is compiled by a couple of fellas, but we know John Predel. He plots out all the dates of Broadcast by going to the British Library, etc., and getting all these international old newspapers out. And all I do is visit that site, and then we think about it and think about what it could mean. But that's really kind. But all credit to Broadcast for that. And the link for Broadcast is down there. Love you too, Mikey.
Hey, it's Mikey from the quiz. Quiz of Rassilon. Kept us sane through lockdown.
Hey, Mikey.
Anyway, let's move on. So, next up.
Sorry, can I just... I saw a brief question. Was a question about whether there was the first clip of Troughton.
Non-off air.
Non-off air. No, we got clips from Power of the Daleks.
I can't find that question, but you seem to have... You
threw up a question. Was it the first non-off air clip of Troughton in the Highlanders? And we've got Troughton in Power of the Daleks entering the capsule. We've also got his face at the end of 10th Planet, really. So,
sure.
Anyway,
move on. Oh, there it is.
Doctor and Co's feet, the first non-off-air footage of Troughton as Doctor Who. No, surely Power of the Daleks.
Sure.
Unless I misunderstood the question.
Okay, next up, in 9th place. Oh, completely missing. The Savages.
I really like this one.
I really like this one. It's one of my pet stories.
How come?
I think it's pretty good. A pretty good little science fiction adventure. It's got a strong science fiction concept. It's got good location work. They dressed the quarry up with some pampas grass to make it look more alien. The telesnaps of the location work look really cinematic. The sets are interesting. I like the whole. There's a really nicely designed room where they do the sort of brain swapping. You got Freddie Yeager playing William Hartnell. There's all kinds of fun and interesting stuff, and then of course the final episode, you've got Stephen leaving to take over as leader of an alien civilization. It's really just the shape of the story feels very nice. And yeah, it might be a little bit derivative and a little bit B movie, but it was a proper sort of alien civilization story. It was nice.
It's got a lot. To me, what stands out is the villain, the sort of human villain who thinks he's superior, and obviously proves himself to be not tangibly human at all. And it gives Hartnell the opportunity to just come out with some really iconic lines that almost sum up the entirety of what many Doctor Who stories are about. Right up there with Troughton's line about the universe having bred the most dreadful things. And actually, it's I recently re-listened to this recently. The thought occurred to me, it's actually got hints of what might seem similar to the Evil of the Daleks with the Dalek factor. And the Doctor sort of transmitting some of himself into the villain of the story.
Yeah.
Which, but yeah, and also like you say, the set work is amazing. We've got some footage of the actual room where the experiments happened, haven't we?
Yeah, we've got off-air clips.
Yeah.
I like the beginning of the story as well. It's really unusual because the doctor arrives and the people of the planet say we've been tracking your journeys through time and space, and the doctor's in awe of the fact there's a civilization sophisticated enough to be watching his goings on and his adventures through time. He's also got a big giant version of he calls it a sonic vibrator. It's a sonic something. I like to think it's the precursor to the sonic screwdriver before he squeezed the technology down.
Can I just answer this one quickly on the Highlanders? We have the sensor clips that Damien Shanahan found in the 90s in the Australian, in the ABC film library. So that's why you've got the Take the Strain and them going up to be executed and so on. Are there some flickering 8mm of the Highlanders? I can't quite remember.
Oh, of the Highlanders,
I don't think there is.
No.
But certainly the better quality clips that we have are sensor clips. Paul Cook, hi Paul. He has a blind spot for the Savages. You can listen to the audio, watch the recon. I've no recollection of what happens the next day. I'm finding this more and more as I get older, but B, as I'm listening to these more intently. And when I really concentrate, I'm not looking at the phone or doing other stuff, then you start to mine out the plot a little bit. And I did listen recently as a sort of prep, because we're going to be recording our Savages episode shortly. And my takeaway from it was that it feels very missing. And there are some really great moments in every episode, interspersed with lots of stuff that I need to see rather than, rather than being able to enjoy it so much on the audio. But great concepts in there.
And it's production design, the cave set with its geometric carvings in the walls, and it's all kinds of curious stuff. That exactly feels like proper science fiction.
Yeah,
like you said a minute ago, Kev, Stephen's departure. It's just quite powerful, actually. It initially wasn't even his choice. He gets invited, and just sort of it's just quite a nice moment to see him realize that he's got a big function to help these people with.
Oh, there is a film trim, isn't there? Yeah, of the Highlanders. Yeah, that's true. Sure.
What is the film trimmer?
There's some TARDIS in woods action, isn't there? Just a glimpse. Someone will tell us exactly what it is and where it's from, but I'm pretty sure there is.
We need Reese.
We need Reese. Yeah. Reese, if you're there, fire away. So yeah, Savages is a really interesting one, and it's another one of those things, one of those ones where it's completely missing, so people might want it more. I think if there was an animation of it, it might slip further down, as people feel it's slightly less missing on the shelf. Any more on the Savages before I go through the sales and stuff?
I think we're ready for the sales.
So, the Savages. Australia broadcast it in 1967. It was junked. They have the records. It was junked in 1976. Prints were also shown in Barbados, New Zealand, and Zambia, and bicycled around. Sierra Leone. Sound the Sierra Leone klaxon. The retelling of the Sierra Leone story is jumbled. And if you go back and find our episode proper on the Mythmakers with Toby, we have a good look at the Sierra Leone story. So they broadcast the Savages in 1970. And what we've learnt in the intervening years is basically either it was shown out of license, i.e. they weren't paying for it and they were doing an illicit showing in the 80s. It was definitely either that or it was sent back to London in 1974. Phil Morris has said it was sent back to London in 1974. Before he commented on it, Paul Vanezis was sounded very sure that it was broadcast out of license, would have existed in Sierra Leone well into the 1990s, whereupon the Civil War caused building damage and the prints were lost. His story was then trumped by Phil's, and there hasn't really been a cogent retelling of the Sierra Leone story. Let's just assume that it's not there, but there's a small ray of hope that I like to cling on to, in that Phil has recounted finding a couple of episodes of Morecambe and Wise a couple of years ago, which, despite this various tales being told about Sierra Leone, it just so happened that the bellboy in the hotel remembered him from years ago, rang him up and said, "Hello, Mr. Morris, you won't remember me, but I know you're after films. And in the cinema in town, which they're knocking down, there's loads of films. And there's 2 BBC ones from the 70s. Would you like them?" So I'd like a retelling of that. So I'm not saying there's anything funny going on, but to me, if 2 Morecambe Wise films could have been sneaked out of the television centre to the cinema for an out-of-license showing, then there's a sliver of possibility that some Doctor Who did as well. Now, but go back to the Mythmakers episode on the podcast proper for that. The Savages was last shown in Singapore in 1972. And I don't think it's fully understood what happened with the Singapore prints, but let's say they were sent back to London, or the Sierra Leone prints were sent back to London. And I think, and I won't labour the point here, but Paul Vanezis famously said a few years ago he thinks there's 2 episodes that are in the hands of private collectors. He said that he thought one of them was on the Australia 1975 return list, which is a big, long list, but then he misremembered it. And it, in fact, wasn't. So what sort of story would you think is automatically on the list? Season 3. The Savage isn't on that list because they junked it in 76. There could be an episode of The Savages out there, but that applies to another story later on. There's a few not impossibles for the Savages, I would say, but not the nice one, in that it wasn't sent back by Australia in 75 and would have been nicked out of a skip. But there you go. It's not utterly impossible. We'll get to see some of the Savages. I'll just check out some comments. Oh, excuse me. There we go. Still recall the thrill of Alex Jones mentioning Sierra Leone live on the One Show, for sure. Yeah. And Richard went off on one on a previous podcast. Paul Cook fondly remembers the bellboy story. Jess Jerkovic. I would like the Phil Morris Adventures turned into a limited series. His version or the real version. Sure. And Richard remembers that he told this out of the blue to Stephen Shapansky about the 2 episodes on an episode of Radio Free Skaro. And the next day or the day later, I think the Daily Mirror or similar turned this into a story of all BBC TV producer says that all 97 episodes exist. Okay, fantastic. Shall we move on? Let's get rid of that. So, in 8th place. Now, in 8th place is a completely missing one. And bear in mind that this polling was done last year, and this was after the full animated version was released. So I think previously to this poll, or previous to the animation, excuse me, that I think Fury from the Deep was held in a higher regard in terms of wanting it back. What do you make of Fury from the Deep, Ant?
I really like it. I mean, it's perhaps slightly bloated. It could do with maybe being a 4-parter, but as it's not, it keeps my attention the whole way. It's obviously notable because it's Victoria's last story, and another thing I like about it particularly is after the main story ends, it doesn't immediately fly off and move on. We get a good number of scenes of blotting up the damage from the story, delicately moving on in the time it takes to do so naturally. And that sets it slightly apart from some other similar stories. I like the music. I like what I've seen of the set design. I've actually not seen the animated recon yet. I've only seen. I've only had it on audio. Maybe I've seen some of the telesnap version. Yeah, the Oaken Quill scene is Doctor Who gold. I would love to be able to watch all of that. And yeah, the music is lovely. It's got a sound effect from Planet of the Daleks in it, I think, as well.
Sure. Thanks,
yeah, that cliffhanger that Rob Moss talked about, that's spooky and haunting.
Sure. Gav, how do you feel about Fury?
I'm not so wild about it. I find it a little bit overrated. It's always held up. I think its reputation is always that it's an absolute stone cold classic, and I find it a bit thin. It doesn't feel particularly missing. I think because we've got really strategically placed sensor clips surviving. Watching the loose cannon for the first time, and it keeps bursting into life at all the exciting moments when somebody gets their neck broken or a bit of seaweed wobbles out. And then we've got the outtakes and the off-air footage from episode 6. So I feel like some of that conclusion is present in my mind's eye. We've also got telesnaps. Yeah, it's not high on my preferred list. Sorry.
I'm just leaving this comment up here from Steve. Possibly the loudest Doctor Who story in the last 60 years. Hard disagree from me. It's the Web Planet. Good grief. This will probably upset Richard. I don't know. But I've always been a bit mystified by Fury from the Deep. And I think it's one that slightly older fans have a great longing for, or had a great longing for, possibly based on the Victor Pemberton book, which took liberties. And yeah, the Oaken Quill stuff is good, but nobody dies. It's a bit plodding. I didn't really find, apart from the brilliant Oaken Quill scene, having Victor Madden with twigs stuck down his roll neck and up his sleeves, it just seemed a bit silly to me. Now, the animation did two things for me. One, I got grumpy about animations. Sorry, animation fans, but they had to reblock it again and put it on these vast sound stages, so it lost some of that sort of multicam feel that I so love. And again, from last time, I'm not knocking the animations or anyone who loves them, but I just want to imagine what it was like originally. But I didn't have a full appreciation of all of those wild helicopter scenes that they did in episode 6 in amongst the Red Sands sea forts. So I'd really, really, really like to see episode 6. That's gone right up there for me. And Victoria's farewell, and so on.
You'll be disappointed that there aren't huge tentacles coming out of the water trying to pull the helicopter back into the sea.
Well, yeah, I'm not surprised that budgets couldn't reach to that.
Sorry, John.
No, go on, Ed.
Do we know how the helicopter scenes in episode 6 were filmed? Is it model work or real helicopter? What's
on the Blu-ray or DVD? They interviewed the helicopter pilot, and he's like this retired mustachioed, toothless bon viveur who's flown everything, and he just sounds like a crazy before health and safety sort of guy. So apparently there are some spectacular scenes of the helicopter swooping in between the sea forts and stuff.
Did he do a loop-the-loop?
Don't know. I'll have to go back, and it's called Wolf or something like that, the pilot. So yeah, that would be spectacular. That's right, Mark. There's a great documentary on the Blu-ray visiting the sea forts, which anyone can do, and they had this amazing lady called Jem or something on there who was the skipper of the boat. Sam Larry comments a mixture of real and fakes with the helicopter. So yeah, I just think in previous times before the animation that this would have ranked a bit higher, and I feel a little bit better within myself that people are agreeing a little bit with me a bit more. Not that it matters what I think. So on with some facts. Here we go then. So Australia broadcast, let's just get rid of the banner. Australia broadcast in 1969. They know it was junked in 1976. Hong Kong broadcast it in 1970 and then sent it on to Singapore. Singapore broadcast it later in 1970 and possibly sent it to Gibraltar or returned it or junked it. And Gibraltar broadcast it in 1973 and broadcast speculates it was junked or returned. So very few sales because late Doctor Who didn't have many sales, incomplete paperwork, but Gibraltar is empty. It has been checked, and we don't have any copies of it, and it's not on that Australia return that I keep mentioning in 75. So unhappily, I don't fancy our chances with that, but I'd be delighted to be proven wrong. Moving on then. Oh, in 7th place. My favourite. Now, I'm the only historical fan here, per se, and you two have been ribbing me about, well, especially Gav has been ribbing me about my love for this story for ages, and assumes that I won't like anything that doesn't have togas in it.
You need to get Toby book on.
You can unleash your love for this story right now, Tim.
Go on, Tim, win us over.
Say again, Ant.
You should unleash your love for this story right now. Come on.
I don't want to unleash my love for it if it's going to get trampled on by you.
I was quite surprised that Toby said it was underrated, because my perception is everyone thinks this is wonderful, and I'm an iconoclast for thinking it's not so great.
It's a forgotten one, I think, largely.
But here it is in 7th place, so it's not that forgotten or underrated. It beats much better stories like the Space Pirates.
The Wheel in Space.
Yeah.
Well, look, season 3 of Doctor Who is mad. There's changes afoot every 5 minutes behind the scenes. You've got John Wiles and Donald Tosh in the driving seat. They want to produce highbrow, different, not childish Doctor Who, and it's season 3 is pushing the boundaries of what Doctor Who can do. Largely unsuccessfully, sometimes successfully. I love the idea of just hiring a comedy writer to write jokes about a period of history like this. You don't need to know the history inside out. He just subverts expectations on, like Odysseus is supposed to be this big bold hero. He's a drunk you've got Paris, who's supposed to be another hero. He's a coward. Paul and Toby described him as Bertie Wooster, and it's just absolutely pushing the limits of what 1960s Doctor Who can do. Go on, Gav.
Where do you get that knowledge from?
What?
You know the characters in order that you know they're being subverted. See, I don't know that story in order to appreciate that the joke is these aren't how you expect them to be.
That's a YP, not an MP, isn't it?
Well, I mean, it wasn't a rhetorical question. I'm genuinely... Is that just a
Everyone's heard of Helen of Troy, haven't they? The most beautiful woman in the world, and
I've heard of Helen of Troy.
His wife doesn't want her back.
I don't know the story very well.
You've heard of the wooden horse?
I have, yes. The only reason I can summarize anything about Helen of Troy is because it's summarized in an episode of Red Dwarf.
Well, that's how we pick up our knowledge, isn't it? The Iliad and the Odyssey were taught at a lot of schools, and we dabbled with it, and we certainly did.
That's what I was wondering. We didn't do it at school.
So even then, I mean, I'd hope there's some sort of superficial knowledge that everybody has. But I love it. I love that it's different. I love that they forget the comedy sort of 2/3 of the way through and descend into a mindless, bloody massacre, as they do in every story in season 3. William Hartnell is superb, and I keep saying it. He's always better in the historicals. I think he's harshly treated by history. He didn't say, "I am a dog." In the previous line, someone had just said "doctor," and he was going to say, "Oh my dear, I'm not a doc." And then he did fluff it, but there were far worse fluffs that he did. So yeah, I adore it, and I find it genuinely funny, and I enjoy examining it and thinking how different it is to everything else.
I'm just curious whether Anthony had the knowledge that I was just wondering whether.
I have vague knowledge at best. Probably, I'm aware of the broad strokes. Maybe enough to get a vague handle on the plot. It's not one I've listened to recently. So I'm broadly with you, Gav. I would like to see episode 4 particularly. And also I would like to see Katerina in her native habitat.
That's episode 4 for 5 minutes, yeah.
If I could see an episode. I have not found it actively amusing, I have to say. Maybe I'm not its target audience, but yeah.
I just want to pick up on this. The Mythmakers would get a strong reputation as a comedy, similar to the Romans. It knocks the Romans into a cocked hat. The Romans is basically, people are going to leave the feed if they haven't already, but the Romans is basically Hartnell tittering and laughing his way through roughly-ish executed slapstick scenes. The Mythmakers, Donald Cotton writes his Doctor Who, his William Hartnell, as a sort of straight man, a person who all the rubbish happens to, and he's not fully aware of what's going on. He's a victim of circumstance in Donald Cotton's Doctor Who, and that's a very British type of comedic character. I love it. Yes, sure. I do like the Mythmakers. It might be the funniest Donald Cotton. Another thing that goes against the Mythmakers is it's very missing, but the soundtrack isn't great. So it was described on another podcast as having quite a lot of wobbly parping. So you can't hear that score and the soundtrack too well. But there's a Target book narrated by what's he called? Sorry, Stephen Thorne, which is really great, and it's a Donald Cotton written one, and that's got another Donald Cotton sort of angle on it. And yeah, the Target book itself is superb and a favourite. 3 episodes of pure joy, followed by something less fun, but equally as good. So, Gav, when you listen to it, do you find it just completely?
Yeah. It's a style of comedy that I don't really get on with. It just feels a little bit smug. No.
It is smug. It is self-serving. It's very different to it's very different to other things that have happened in that season. But that season is so interesting. It's so different. I always wonder why, because the Massacre hasn't come up yet, but I always wonder why, when you poll these two, the Massacre always just shades it. So I'd be interested in your two opinions on that as well, because I'm guessing if you didn't know much about the Siege of Troy, which you don't need to, then the French Wars of Religion, I did a Twitter poll the other day ready for the podcast, and I think 96% of people, including me, claimed complete ignorance about the historical subject. So it'll be interesting when that...
for listening to and understanding the Massacre on that point. Yeah.
I mean, to be clear, on the Mythmaker, what I'm saying is on the Mythmakers, it makes sense as a story. That, I mean, you can follow it, you follow the plot as an outsider. But what I'm saying is, it requires someone like you to tell me that some of the jokes are that these people are not as they should be. So, you know, so if, I was trying to think of a historical character in the Massacre and failed. But you know, if they went to the Second World War and Hitler was a stand-up comedian, I would understand the disparity with history. But going to the Mythmakers,
don't give Big Finish ideas.
Laughing, saying, "Oh, Paris is supposed to be a hero, and he's not here." That just goes over my head. It doesn't stop me. You know, I can follow the story.
Sure. Okay. Well, I love the Mythmakers, and it's also one where I'm kind of nervous if it would ever come back. Of course, I'd be delighted, but I think it can't possibly be as good as it is in my head, and it might get undermined by some of the visuals. But there we go. So let's have a look at some facts. Let's get rid of that. So, the Mythmakers was broadcast in 1966. Now, the Mythmakers was on the Australia return in 1975. So, if somebody nicked part 3 of Galaxy 4 out of a skip and part 2 of the Underwater Menace, it's not impossible that some Mythmakers has made it out there into a fan collector's collection, and it's less likely it survived for 50 years, but there you go. It is a route to its existing. New Zealand broadcast in 1969, sent it to Singapore in 1972. It was also broadcast in Barbados and Zambia. Sierra Leone, it's the same story again. Broadcast in 1970, possibly returned to London in 1974, possibly blown up in the 90s, or there's a very small glimmer of hope that if other BBC films made it to that cinema in Freetown, then maybe some of these could have too, but I don't know. And they very probably didn't. And it was last shown in Singapore in 1972, Fate Unknown. Junked or returned. So it's not one of those where you're going, it's absolutely impossible that we'll ever get to see some. It just needs a minor miracle. Okay. And again, I'll stop going on about it, but Toby appeared on our Mythmakers podcast, and he absolutely stole the show with it. It was absolutely fantastic. So there we go. So in 6th place, the Abominable Snowman. Who wants to go first?
I don't have strong feelings about this one, actually. I would like to see it, but I think now that we've got the Web of Fear, the drive to see more Yeti has lapsed a little bit.
Yeah, this is another one I find a little bit thin and a bit similar to Fury. I'm always surprised when listening to it how well regarded it is. That's not to say it's bad or there's anything wrong with it. It's enjoyable. There's a lot of atmosphere, but when it's up there as it is in this list, this high, you expect something a bit more extraordinary than a relatively simple, based on the stooge story.
I think of Wars and a castle when I think of this story. I don't know if it's technically a castle; it's probably got a better name. But I don't. When I think of the missing episodes of this story, I don't think, "Oh my word, I would love to see that desperately." It's nice, I'm sure.
Doesn't feel like a lot happens in 6 episodes. I never really understand how they fill another 4 episodes to get there after the episode 2.
Well, as with so many of these stories, I think the performers genuinely, no matter what story they're in, the performances are lovely, and I will watch them no matter what they're up to.
I've got a real soft spot for this, and it's one of those nostalgia / not quite got it all accurately in my head, but I love part 1. I want to see those TARDIS scenes with the dressing up box where they get the Ganter out and all of that.
That's a good point. A really weird TARDIS set as well.
Yeah, I find that really, really appealing. I'm not the only one about, and I'm not the most knowledgeable one about, but I'm a Nigel Neal fan, and this borrows largely off the BBC Abominable Snowman story. So I find it appealing on that front. I find it incredibly atmospheric. I haven't read the camera scripts like you might have done, Gav, but I'd like to see how they did the denouement of it all, and I just really enjoy it, and I like the atmosphere. And I think, bearing in mind you two are completely not bothered about it, I think it's one of my most wanted Troughton returns.
Wow.
And there's comments, I saw Steve White say that, that Webb is much better. I find this one far more appealing, and I've never really found the appeal of Web of Fear. So there, I've said it. I've outed myself, and I'm an Abominable Snowman fan, or I feel like I should be. I feel quite excited at the prospect of seeing any more of it.
Can I just ask him, how did you feel about the Web of Fear before you saw
that? Same as Fury from the Deep, really. But again, it's one of those nostalgia things. I think for many, many people, in that the Web of Fear target book was the one that everybody read. I just felt it was a bit, am I allowed to say boring?
You can. You're wrong, but you can.
No, when it came back, episode 4
is not boring.
It's not boring.
5's quite boring.
5's quite boring, and 6 is a bit badly plotted. Am I allowed to say that? But when it came back, Web of Fear, I loved it. And the thing that impressed me most was the sheer violence of the Yetis. It's quite scary. They're really going for it, aren't they? That kind of impressed me. But I just don't have that attachment to it. Victoria is ever so silly in it. What is she doing? Just wandering around those tube tunnels, whining. And when you contrast the Web of Fear with Enemy of the World, Troughton is full of life in the Enemy of the World, isn't he? Playing both characters. There's loads of humour in it. And when you watch him, because for me, Troughton's era is all about watching Troughton. It's Hartnell for the storylines for me, and the Troughton era for the main characters. And Troughton just seems flat in the Web of Fear to me. He seems, and perhaps that's because he's knackered. Perhaps that's because he's tired out, having just done the Enemy of the World. So absolutely delighted to see it. It improves slightly in my outlook, but it's just not for me. It wasn't for me, but I get why people love it. But I've kind of found the idea of Yetis firing unrelated web guns in the London Underground harder to get on with than Yetis being in the Himalayas.
Yeah.
And I know people have said that's a great thing about it. I think Moffat has said or RTD maybe, or one of them has said that's a great thing about it. It's just stupid, but it works. I'm not sure.
That's often cited as a big Doctor Who thing, isn't it? Juxtaposition, weird juxtaposition. I get that to an extent, but yeah.
Thanks, Steve. Sure, and just to say with the Abominable Snowman, I'm sure it will dip once the animation is out, if the animation ever makes it out, and I'm looking forward to that. I don't really look forward to the animations, but I'm looking forward to this one. I think it will be nice. So some quick facts for this one. It's quite a complicated one, and we'll have to go into more depth on it when we get to it in the podcast. So let's just hide Steve's comments wherever it is. So get rid of the banner. So it was broadcast in Australia in 1968, returned in 1975, the big Australia return, and that's possibly why we've got episode 2, because episode 2 might have escaped out of the skip into the wild. So there's perhaps some opportunities there for it to have survived. New Zealand broadcast it in 1970, probably junked it. Now, this was also shown in Hong Kong, Singapore, Gibraltar, Zambia, and Nigeria. The last comment Phil Morris made about these films, Abominable Snowman, Enemy of the World, Web of Fear, was that they all travelled together around all of those countries, the same set, Hong Kong, Singapore, Gibraltar, Zambia. And as we know, Enemy of the World and Web of Fear wound up in BPTV, in JOS, and Phil Morris found them 40 years later. The BBC sales paperwork, the top sheet for the Abominable Snowman says that it was sold in the same month as the other two stories. So it could have been shown in BPTV in the same run of series. But Phil Morris reports it wasn't there. It could also have been shown somewhere else. It could also have been shown in a place called Kaduna. Now, we know Phil Morris has been to Kaduna, but he's not revealed the full extent of what he's found in Nigeria. So whether it's likely he's still got stuff or found stuff back then, probably not after all this time. But it is a window of opportunity for it to have survived, however unlikely it is. It would be a minor miracle, but there you go. So I would say, you know, Abominable Snowman, let's see what was found in Nigeria, or, you know, he's never said what was found in this place. Why not? Why not just say, I found nothing else there, and put everyone's minds at rest? But, you know, he probably hasn't. Excuse me. So, moving on. In 5th place, The Massacre.
Took me a while to get to grips with this story. I never disliked it, but I just didn't understand it, I suppose, mainly. I found it requires a great deal of attention to keep up with the various protagonists and antagonists. But the last time I listened to it, I paid close attention and got a great deal out of it.
Sure. I would say it might actually be my most wanted historical because of that very reason. I don't feel I've got to grips with it yet, and I think if I were to watch it properly with any visuals, or even if it was animated, just some visuals that I can get my teeth into, my mind teeth, I would like to see that, and I think it would come away better as a result of having something visual to go with the audio. And like we said a minute ago, I'm not hugely involved, aware of some of the intricacies at play. So I could do with some extra context or material.
Again, it's Wiles and Tosh wanting to do adult drama and something, you know, interesting. And it's one of those season 3 stories which has many authors, Luca Rotti and Tosh, but you can't really tell who wrote what because Luca Rotti's long dead and Tosh claims to have done everything. We've just recorded the podcast about it. It's in the can, so I'm quite well up on it. What I would say and what I said on that without revealing too much is I think up until about 2 minutes before the end of episode 3, I think it's possibly one of the best structured and set up Doctor Who stories of the era. And I contextualize that by talking about the Abbot of Amboise thing. Hartnell needed a week off, so he's hardly in episode 2, but Stephen's allowed to go on and meet all these other characters. And up until about 2 minutes before the end of episode 3, you are with Stephen not knowing whether it's the Abbot or not.
Mm.
Why on earth they killed him at the end of episode 3? Probably to save costume changes in episode 4. Completely pulls the rug from under the tension. You probably get a bit of a moment, but I think up until that point, it's great. There's a lot of sort of BBC English RP actors in there, and it's very hard to discern exactly who is doing what on the audio. Sure, and it's always been slightly intangible, but if you hook onto the main ones, especially Andre Morel and the Queen and so on, you don't need all of that context. You can just tell it's going to be great. And it's got this great sort of, Jess Jerkovic might comment, but I'm going to describe it as menacing medieval jazz soundtrack going on, which is great. And it's directed by Paddy Russell. And, all of her Doctor Who's are really solid. And we've got some set photographs and it looks superb. And it's got a few great sort of character pieces in it, hasn't it? Like, what's he called? Eric Chitty. And the barman sounds absolutely great as well. So I'd love to see it. Episode 4, you've got the speech and all of that. I don't care so much for all of that. That's all rewrites.
We want to see the bad TARDIS, though, on location.
Yeah.
There's a really dodgy TARDIS prop, which is just a front, but with 2 just sort of badly painted bits of wood for the side panels.
Yeah. And I believe in the internal scene, the Hartnell speech.
Oh, yes.
I believe there's some corroborated sort of witness statements that say you can see the inside of the TARDIS doors.
Yeah.
The wooden doors.
Actually, 10th Planet 4 as well, we think. They're on the studio floor plan. We did it in the Doctor Who magazine set recreation.
Sure. Let me just catch up with a few of your guys' comments. Yes, it's finished third. No, see, not bad for a story with no extent episodes. It's very missing. Hello, Lit Randalls. Yeah, it has got that intangible sort of can't get it in my head sort of thing, but I've really studied it and careful listening to it really sort of paid off. I also read the script for a couple of the episodes as well as I listened, and it all became crystal clear. The Massacre of St. Bartholomew is the most missing story. Agreed. 10 out of 10. It's really popular, really popular, and it feels like it's got more of a pull than the Mythmakers, and I think that's why it always ranks slightly higher. Loads of great comments there. Thanks so much. So we'll just have a look at some facts mixed with some speculation by me. Let me just get that comment down. Okay. There's going to be some familiar stories by this point. So, Australia broadcast it in 1966 and they junked it in 1975, 76, I think. I've covered it up with my badge. But, again, this is one that you might expect to be on the Australia 75 return if you haven't got the list. So this might be the other one that you think, is this one of Paul Venez's 2 episodes that's in the hands of a private collector? Could be. My speculation could be completely nuts, but I think this could be either this or one of the Savages. One of this or one of the Savages could be one of those. New Zealand broadcast it in 69, sent it to Singapore in 72. Barbados and Zambia also had prints cycled through there. Sierra Leone, the same story as we've heard twice already. Last shown in Singapore in 72, and the fate there is unknown, even though it's been visited 2 or 3 times, and Phil Morris has all the paperwork. He's not sharing what happened with that. So it's not impossible. It's not one of the least likely that we'll ever get to see. It's not a Highlanders in that regard. Okay, getting to the end, or getting towards the end. 4th place. You two are going to love this. Marco Polo.
I would actually be quite excited to see Marco Polo if it ever turns up. It's I know it's a historical, and historically it's not my, ironically, it's not been my favorite. But it's just got such an atmosphere about it. And as you'll go into later, so many countries screened it. I would be horrendously surprised if it's not there somewhere. And I love the fact that it uses the Indiana Jones-esque maps, doesn't it? I might be making that up. I can't remember. But no, yeah. Gav, what do you think about Marco Polo?
Not bothered. I'm sorry. I just don't get it. I tried again recently. I just don't get it. I don't get what the fuss is about. But then, I mean, yeah, no, sorry. And there was a particular bit where the story stops dead for that the story within a story. And I just found it excruciatingly boring. And then, so what was I listening to recently? And somebody said, "Oh, they'd much rather have that kind of padding than escaping running." Oh, it was you and your stupid podcast, Tim. You said if an episode, or it might have been Paul. You said if you're going to have padding in an episode, you'd much rather it was sort of cultural texture like that than escaping from a prison cell, running down a corridor, or getting captured. I mean, I'd rather not have either, but a little bit of running down a corridor never hurt anyone, did it? No,
it might get some inventive set design along the way.
Yes,
you'll get that in Marco Polo as well, so I shouldn't be mean in that one.
Well, this is the other thing, is that as I said before, I get very excited about sort of imaginative set design, attempting to do too ambitious things with too little money. So I like seeing valiant attempts at spaceships and alien planets and things like that, because that's just what gets me interested. And the BBC can do costume drama. That's not a great shock to me. The fact that Marco Polo looks great, I don't know why it wouldn't. It's you can go to your stock props department and get all your stone pillars and what have you, and Bob's your uncle. But yeah, no, I don't. Sorry, everyone.
Sorry.
You're not sorry at all, are you?
Well, I mean, no.
Well, my thoughts are all on record on the first episode of this podcast, but I think it's a really fascinating concept in terms of the sort of terms of reference, those early terms of reference of Doctor Who, the scope of Doctor Who. It tries to do everything: the historical, the science, the educate, the entertain, inform. It tries to do all of that, and I think it does it quite well. And I quite enjoy. It makes me feel good that that's what Marco Polo is trying to do. And you never quite have anything quite that explicit in those Rethian values again in Doctor Who. I find it fascinating that it's a long journey, and Doctor Who never does that again, does it? It never takes. Well, not until Moffat starts skipping 5 billion years whenever he fancies it, but or 500 years on the planet Christmas or whatever it was. But it's unique in classic Doctor Who in that it takes that time to tell the story. I find that really interesting. The cast is superb. There's some great comedy in it as well. When Kublai Khan turns up at the end, him and the Doctor buddying it up as sharing each other's old age pains and whatnot. I love it. Anyway, we did an hour on that right at the start of the podcast. So
go on, get the comments that tell me I'm wrong. Come on, let's get it over with.
Everyone's scared of you, Gav, because you do stuff on the Blu-rays.
The thing is, though, when you're saying you like it because of what it's attempting to do,
yeah, and I think it's successful in that as well.
Okay.
So again, it provides something different. Only the William Hartnell era spreads its wings with Doctor Who. It tries to do this. It tries to do the chase. It tries to do time meddling. It tries to do high-minded historicals. It tries to do massacres. It tries to do a musical. Only the William Hartnell era does this because it's flexing and finding where it's going to go before it settles into monsters and base under siege, with a brilliant comic actor in the lead. Troughton's not a comic actor, you know what I mean? But it's a comic portrayal. And so the Hartnell era doesn't always work. It's fascinating for that. And every time it does something different, the outliers always seem more interesting, don't they? The same is true of Blink.
This is always my defense of the Space Pirates, and no one agrees with me. Because the Space Pirates trying to do something different. It's no monsters. It's a space opera. It's world building. It's not your typical Doctor Who story. It's the cast are missing for part of it, and it's I just love the fact that it's peculiar, but that doesn't usually. The Web Planet, and again for the same reason, I love the Web Planet for what it tries to do.
A lot of people I've seen have often said, "Oh, actually, they really tried, didn't they?" But I think they actually succeeded. I know we're not talking about the Web Planet right now, but that's a glorious watch. And Tim, yes, I agree with your take on the first Doctor era. Generally, it's just the extent that it tries and succeeds is marvelous, and I think later seasons could well have done with taking a page out of that book and made the best out of it.
It is the unlimited format of the story, which is something that has been lost and not quite recaptured since. Is that it's the Terry Nation approach. You can just go anywhere and do anything, and I love it for that. And can I also just say as well, I appeared on another podcast recently, which hasn't gone out yet, but we need to give Hartnell a break as well, because he's thought as this doddery old failing actor. He's getting all of these genres thrown at him, isn't he? All of them.
Yeah.
And he manages just fine. He gets the odd line wrong and, has to fluff his way through a few bits. But none of the other actors who played the Doctor have all of this stuff thrown at them that they have to do week in, week out. Comedy one week, massacres the next week, sci-fi the next week, silly runarounds the week after that.
He has the ability to give anything the trait that he chooses. There are scenes where some actors might be whimsical and light-hearted, but he's done a good job of making it actually serious, making you care about the scenarios. And if it's a light-hearted story, he's going to have fun with it, and it's going to come through to us, the viewer.
He also one of these days I'm gonna sit down and I'm gonna tally this up, because I think he doesn't fluff as much as Troughton does, but Troughton disguises it better. Troughton just takes a rough approximation of the line he's supposed to have learned and lets it be the other actor's problems. Whereas Hartnell, if he thinks he's getting the phrasing not exactly right, it upsets him and it throws him and he stumbles a bit. So one day I'm going to do a tally, because Hartnell's reputation is a bit unfair.
Agreed.
Sure. Okay, so Marco Polo sold a little bit around the place. So first shown in Australia, broadcast in 1965. Fate unknown, but probably junks. Now, if you go back to episode 1, we talk about this rumor of an Australian collector, sometimes rumoured as a gangster, some referred to as a hoaxer, or by Paul Vanez as a time waster. That's a fascinating story, and it's about the possibility that Australia had their own copies, and how this guy who purported to have full Marco Polo, full power of the Daleks and full evil of the Daleks, was found. He wasn't broadcasting that he had these stories. He was found, and we tell the story in the Marco Polo episode about what happened there and how it isn't necessarily 100% tightly resolved, but interesting nonetheless. So if you don't know that story, I'll go back and listen to episode 1. New Zealand broadcast in 1966, and it's quite well known now that episodes 1 and 2 were sent on as an audition, a try before you buy, to Iran, where Paul Vanezis has said publicly more than once he thinks they're still there because they were seen there. But how the heck do you get those out? I think you wait for regime change, don't you? Now, Marco Polo was shown in 25 countries in total, because the early Doctor Who was shown far and wide, which is one reason we've still got a lot of it. Unfortunately, though, despite it being sold in all of those countries, prints were bicycled around. There weren't 25 prints of it. Now, the early prints were all suppressed field prints. They didn't contain as many lines of information in them. And I forget the year, but at some point, they think they recalled all the suppressed field prints and reissued with stored field prints, which had more information, better quality prints. So yes, it might have sold to 25 countries, but it's also possible that all of those old prints were recalled and thrown in the furnace. So it's a bit of a debate that happens between the experts, isn't it? It's shown everywhere, so surely they must find a copy of it. But really, it might only have existed in 1971 as one copy somewhere, or, by 1980 as one copy somewhere, or no copy somewhere, which is plenty interesting. It was last shown in Ethiopia in 1971. Ethiopia is part of the TIE network. There's a company based out of Wigan called TIA, T-I-E-A, which has an uncanny resemblance to TIE. Philip Morris has said he's been to Ethiopia. Every man and their dog in 2013 thought Marco Polo was coming back, and for about 8 years, he's not said squat about it. So I'd love to know what he got up to in Ethiopia. Not saying it's been found. It seems unlikely it's been found, but it seems an opportunity for it to have survived. Okie dokie. I'll just have a quick scan of the comments. No, you're rubbish. No, sorry, there's so many comments. I just can't keep up with them. So we'll move on to the big top 3. Would you Adam and Eve it? In third place is Power of the Daleks.
I would put this higher personally, but that's just me.
Did the animation make any difference to you, Ant, in terms of Evil of the Daleks? Because Evil came out just after this poll went out.
No, actually. With both Power and Evil, I think I want them both the same amount, both before and after the animation. Both animations were great. And I noticed the other day that the version of Power on BritBox seems to have now been the special edition, whereas it was previously not before. Not finished watching yet. But no, Power, it is my most wanted. It would be number 1 for me. If Power came back, I would feel somewhat, I could relax. Not totally, obviously. I'd still want the others, but this is my absolute top tier. I think the performance is in it, the characters, the guest actors, and the way the story weaves through untapped emotions from characters to the other, and just the absolute sneakiness of the Daleks, themselves.
They're brilliant, aren't they?
I almost can't put into words how much this story means to me. And that we've got the telesnaps. It's not really a missing story. I mean, it is, but we've got all the telesnaps. We've got the animation. The audio quality is really good.
Loads of off-air clips as well.
Loads of off-air clips. The set photography coming out of every pore. But that doesn't matter. I still need to see it in its entirety.
Sure. Gav, you probably can't stand it, I'm guessing.
Well,
no, I'm joking. Surely,
I'm not as wild about it as Anthony, I have to say.
Wow.
I'm with Mr. Bignell in the comments there. I've never quite seen the appeal of it. I mean, the appeal, the mass hysteria about it. I think it looks a little bit cheap. It worries me that of the 3 clips we have, there's something bumping into a camera or falling over or wobbling in each of them, which seems to be a worryingly high hit rate. But maybe that's the only
Barry, isn't it?
Sorry?
Not Richard Martin. It's Christopher Barry, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, he's...
the clip of the Zarbi from the Web Planet, the Zarbi hitting the camera, is one of my favourite bits of that story.
Yes. Yeah, Doctor Who's rubbish on the whole, isn't it? But no, I mean, what I'm just sort of measuring my enthusiasm against the positioning. Don't get me wrong. I would probably open a bottle of wine if Power of the Daleks came back. It would be that special a day.
Just one.
Yeah. But no, I mean, partly again, as you say, it doesn't feel very missing. I mean, the first time I watched the Loose Cannon Recon, and you've got the clips from the end of 10th Planet, you've got the off-air clips, you've got telesnaps, loads of set photos from that recording session. I felt like I'd just seen episode 1 for real. The first time I saw that Loose Cannon, I absolutely couldn't believe it. And yeah, we've got a lot of set photos, quite a few clips. Yeah, Power, it just feels a little bit... one of the comments that I saw there was how well it works on audio. And I think that probably helps its reputation a great deal, because it is such a strong script and is such a strong concept, and you don't have to worry about Daleks falling over or hitting the camera if it's all in your mind. So
I want to briefly point out to me, Gav, you talked about how if it turns up, there might be rubbish shots and it might be all flimsy. I would actually not be disappointed, because at that stage, I'm sort of invested in the archaeology of what did this story look like.
Yes, as a lover of the chase, I can see the irony in my comments.
Yeah, like it can be flaky, but that's what it is. So,
I suppose it depends whether we want a return to be the kind of story that's so good we can show our friends to persuade them Doctor Who isn't rubbish, or the kind of episode we just close the curtains and enjoy in the dark, like The Chase.
I don't know whether all my friends are either on board or they're not at this stage.
I don't know if Reese were here, he'd be all over this. Do you guys know about this? Is there stuff in the Derek Dodd auction lot that we've never seen?
I
know there was the miniature Dalek, production line Dalek that sold for an exorbitant.
Do you mean that we've never seen that hasn't been?
Do you know any secret stuff, Gav? I think that's the question.
I'm scared to say, because I lose track of whether things I've seen are on DVDs or not.
Yeah, and twirl your mustache. Yeah.
Yes.
Excellent.
I think it's all out on DVD.
Sure. I think Power's awesome. I think it's one of the best stories that they've ever done. And I'm more about storytelling than production design. And I think the pacing of the 6 episodes is probably the best paced 6-parter. The inexorable build-up as the Daleks get nastier and nastier. It's got a bit of padding in the first 2, maybe, but when it starts building up, and that's juxtaposed with the deterioration of Lesterson, I think it's just superb. And I think it's the best they ever are. The first time that Terry Nation doesn't write them. It's not childish. There's genuine threat. It's a bit genre, but I think it's just an absolute delight. Having said all that, I feel like I know it inside out because I've focused on it so much. Like Paul Cook said, I've bought it that many times. You know, I bought. If you'd have told me in 2013 that by 2022 I'd have bought Power of the Daleks on the BBC shop, then on DVD, then on Blu-ray, I'm probably missing one since then, and you'd have told me we still didn't have it, you could have put me away. I just feel I know it so well. There's so much of it exists, and therefore I don't feel the need to see it as much as I do other things which would be more interesting. I personally feel more of a pull to watch the Space Pirates and learn more than I would with Power of the Daleks. Does that make sense? People might think I'm crazy.
No,
and it's one of the best stories ever done.
I think that's a better articulation of what I was sort of grasping for. And I think I do kind of take it for granted because I've known it so well since listening to the audio cassettes in whatever it was, the 90s.
Sure.
Yeah, okay. Sorry, I was just reading that comment. Yeah.
Any more on Power, lads? So let's just have a quick look at a rattle through Power. It's let me get rid of that.
The Dalek voices are rubbish. That's another point I would make.
Say that again. Sorry, Gav.
The Dalek voices are rubbish in Power. That's another reason that it's not quite up there.
That's an outright disagree from me, I'm afraid to say.
It's not modulated enough.
You're not modulated enough.
So, Power was broadcast in 1967 in Australia, returned to the UK in 75. It is linked to the story I was talking about the film collector / time waster / gangster / hoaxer. New Zealand broadcast it in 1969 and sent it on to Singapore. Singapore broadcast it in 1972. Fate unknown. Junked, returned, or omni-rumoured. Just before I go to that, the BBC Film Library retained episode 6 on 35mm before it was junked. There were rumours going around that got picked out of a skip. I mentioned that, but I won't labour the point. Maybe we'll do that more when we get to Power of the Daleks on the podcast proper. Back in 2013, again, Power of the Daleks was one of those things that everybody in the know seemed to think had been found and seemed to think it had been found in Africa. At least that's some of the reports that were being said. And for that to happen, it would have had to have been sent there from Singapore. Now, we'll cover this in depth another time and why it probably didn't happen. But that was the rumour. And it doesn't help that you've got Mr. Morris going around saying, oh, they just threw everything in the crate and it just went with the rest of the films. So when other films from that block turn up in Nigeria, The War Machines leaps to mind, which was shown in the same block of episodes as Power of the Daleks, then it adds fuel to the fire of the rumour. But are people going on broadcast seeing that and then putting that in saying, oh, this definitely happened? But we'll cover that in depth another time. I'm not saying it's happened. I'm saying it's very, very improbable. There's no paperwork to say these things happened. Reign of Terror in Cyprus is a completely different set of circumstances. The Crusade in New Zealand, where it wasn't broadcast, is a completely different set of circumstances. Phil Morris says these things happened. He's never proved it. The written experts, John Peddle, I think Mr. Molesworth, say, why would it happen? Why would people pay to send on films that they weren't going to show? So we've got a top 2. I don't think it is beyond the wit of man to speculate what number 2 might be. No, interestingly, this has been animated since, and I suspect it would swap with Power because we've gained 6 episodes back, which feel slightly less missing than they did before. Evil. So, Gav, do you prefer Evil over Power as a story? It's more silly, so you probably do, you silly sausage. Do you like the chase? If chase is numero 1.
Doesn't feel very Dalek-y, Evil of the Daleks. Until it gets to Skaro, it's sort of Victorian melodrama. And you got 2 episodes in the 1960s, which are an overhang of Ben and Polly supposedly should have still been in the first 2 parts, and then they weren't. So it's a bit of a weird one, Evil. I think there you go. Paul Cook. He knows what's what. Yeah, I think Power. I'd rather have Power than Evil. I mean, episode 7 is the blockbuster, isn't it? But we've got the off air. We've got a lot of photos again. Second best animation behind the moon base. Yeah.
And we actually have a full episode, which we can't say for Power.
That said, episode 2 is very, very watchable, and that is not very Dalek-y. So
I think it's like one of the best episodes there, isn't it? Episode 2. I think we've probably got the best episode back for me. Yes, we're missing the visuals of 6 and 7.
So I don't know if you'd rather have episode 2 than episode 7.
Well, you can't ask me that because I've got episode 2. I know. I just think No, I'm not saying that. I think episode 2 is one of the best episodes there is. It's got quite a lot. It's got some quite nice building in it of the threat, and then the brilliant Dalek emerging from
the revelation of what's happening.
No, that's Colin Baker, mate.
Sorry.
I think personally, I'd rather see some Evil come back, even though I don't think it's as good as Power, because I've got less of an imprint of what it would have looked like. And as I said before, Power wouldn't be a very high wanted return necessarily. We've got the first Troughton scenes more or less, but there's a few more mysteries with Evil, aren't there? And we've got to see some of those sets on Skaro. I don't know if he's watching, my old friend Chris. He got in touch after the last live podcast we did, and back in 2013 he just said to me, when I was saying, I'm not that bothered about Evil, he just said, all I need to do is think of these words, and it makes him weak at the knees. It's the same with me since he said that. Troughton on Skaro just feels very surreal set of ideas to put together.
It's powerful.
Yeah, those battle scenes look crap though, don't they, with the models?
Yeah, and eyewitnesses seem to corroborate the idea that idea did not come off. There's contemporary eyewitness statements that say it looked really bad when the toys were intercutting with the live action. So it's not like I mean, you can't disguise it well, can you?
No, you can't. Okay, so let's just have a quick look at some little facts, and we're very nearly there. Let's just get rid of Kieran. So, Australia broadcast in 1969, returned in 1975. Is that how episode 2 escaped? Again, linked to this Australian time waster story. Hong Kong broadcast in 1969. They sent it to Singapore. Singapore broadcast in 1969, Fate Unknown. And New Zealand broadcast it in 1970 and junked it in 1974. There's not a lot of ways for it to still survive there, unfortunately. But there you go. I won't carry on about 2013. So, the keen-eyed among you will know that the top most wanted missing story is, of course, it is Dalek's Master Plan.
It's a lot of episodes back, for one thing.
That's a key factor, isn't it?
So you're talking value.
Yeah.
You're picking one story. You're going to pick this over 10th Planet. You'd be mad not to. Yeah, I said before, it's very well represented with 2, 5, and 10. So it feels like got nice slices, but it's such a varied story. It's so episodic. We're quite lucky in that we've got one of the two Egyptian.
Sorry, Gav. I was just telling Jess.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were trying to attract my attention for some dramatic. I thought you were about to unveil your recovery of episode 12 just from in your jacket to hold up the film can. Yeah, that's I've said before, it's two stories, isn't it? You've got your gritty first half, your Terry Nation half, and then the fact that they needed to pad it for another 5 or 6 weeks, and then you've got your slightly sillier half. Although in amongst that, there's some very brutal stuff and a very brutal ending. But yeah, I was just saying that like with the Egyptian mini adventure, we've got 50%. So I'm not particularly bothered about seeing episode 9, for instance. But episode 4 on the Devil's Planet. Or is that 3? I lose track in that bit. It just feels completely unknown. I want to see the pursuit ship, Dalek pursuit ship inside and out, that set. Double-sided set. There's loads of stuff. All the stuff on Campbell at the end. And
Katarina's full
death of Katharina. Despite what nice slices we've got, it's just such a sprawling and varied story. As like Toby was saying, I mean, you could have 95% of this, and we still wouldn't have the cricket and the what was the other thing he mentioned? New Year's Eve and
Well, the last episode of the podcast that went out, apart from the Demon special, was Gav talking for
too long.
90 minutes, very expertly and brilliantly about the Daleks master plan and what it would have looked like, and also some because Terry Nation's draft scripts all exist. Gav brilliantly sort of pieces together a rough draft of the story and separates out the Spooner stuff from the Nation's stuff. And Gav I'm not sorry to blow smoke at your backside, Gav, but this is what happens, and it's a superb listen as Gav does that. So if you've not heard that podcast, it's audio only. It's on this feed. It's on Podbean. It's on iTunes. I'd really recommend doing that. But yeah, fair enough. 1, I spelt it wrong. 2, there are 9 episodes that would come back, which is a whole chunk of that brilliant, mad season 3 of Doctor Who, which is so interesting. Just to say, part 2 of Daleks Master Plan, which is coming up on July the 2nd, but is on the Patreon now, is 2 hours long, and it deals with all of this. Was it sold overseas? What did the Australian censors make of it? Can any more of it exist? We've got John Preddle on there. We've got Gav again, and we've got Rhys Williams from Doctor Who magazine, who are absolutely brilliant at forensically taking this stuff apart and telling us all about it. And there's 2 hours worth there. So that is all going to happen on the 2nd of July. I'm not going to do it now. So
I don't think you have spelt it wrong, by the way.
Say again, Gav.
I don't think you have spelt it wrong.
Well, it's 2 words, right?
It's 2 words. I had it as 1 word.
Oh.
Probably confusing it with an Oasis album or something.
Where was that?
That was on the banner at the bottom, and then Bignall, Mr. Bignall.
Oh, did you fix it before I noticed?
I fixed it before you noticed.
Well, we'll edit this bit from the live stream.
Sure. Yeah, so I think we're done. By the way, Gav, I loved your description of the original 6-parter.
Thank you. There's a YouTube video on the way. Eventually. He was at the beginning of the Abandoned Planet. It's really weird. So it seems that Hartnell was on set for like 2 scenes, live in studio on the Friday night. and then was written out of the rest. So very strange. The kind of thing that like in a normal situation, you would think it would be a pre-recorded bit of film to make sure he could have the whole day off or the whole week off, but he wasn't. He's in studio on Friday night briefly for a bit of The Abandoned Planet, and then vaporizes. I think it's his birthday the next day, so maybe he had to go somewhere and was allowed. But that seems really unconventional, but I don't know, odd.
Yeah. And like Richard's saying there, there's going to be lots of great missing touches.
Interesting thing about that dissolve between the two shots, which is often cited as, and rightly, as Camfield's magic touch. That's in the camera script. So, because like sometimes I think we sort of forget how heavily prescribed every movement was. And we're used to seeing behind the scenes footage of more modern productions where directors are making, or directors of photography are making spontaneous decisions about they've suddenly found a nice angle, or these line up really nicely if we just move the camera slightly to the left. So I love the fact that this thing, which everyone has rightly latched onto as a beautiful example of Camfield's work, was a thing that he'd thought about and had to be written down and put in the camera script. It's not like these things were made up on the day, as they might be in a modern production.
Quick question before you go. Such times where you've analysed the camera script, worked out the movements and the blocking of the camera movements, does that make you more, when you think you've got it clear in your head, does that make you more keen to see the missing story? Or does it sort of make you think, oh, okay, well, I've got that clear now? And
it's a good question. It makes me feel more kind of content in having a grasp of what it looked like. It makes it feel less missing, but then you get the drive to see whether your interpretation and assumptions are correct. We sat through the Space Pirates episode 2 with John Kelly with the camera script, and there's so many deviations from the camera script as to what's on screen, and there's so many things that should have been slightly better and for some reason aren't, and there's shots that are dropped, and there are extra shots that aren't in the script. So just to contradict myself, all of the fact that the camera scripts were sort of supposedly very strict and prescriptive, for whatever reason, it's not always precisely followed. And I might do a video on that one day, because it's really fascinating. I think the Space Pirates is quite an exception, because I watched through an episode of the Space Museum with the camera script, and it is identical. But then you probably expect that from a technical perfectionist like Pinfield. But if the Space Museum was missing, you could recreate that basically 100% accurately from the camera script. But when we did it with the Space Pirates, it's all over the place. There's loads of things you would just get wrong if you were going off the camera script. So yeah, I might do that with Master Plan. A couple of Master Plan episodes. It'd be interesting to see.
That'd be good.
Where on the swingometer Camfield sits on extreme precision, because that's his reputation, isn't it? Military precision. But yeah, we're so lucky with the camera scripts, and it is my intention one day to make as much use as possible of some of that, to do a different kind of reconstruction, because the animations are rehearsal schedules. Yeah. I was saying in the previous live stream about the wheel in space, it's all written down, it's all there, what it should look like. And if they stuck to the camera script, then we could shot by shot, scene by scene, reconstruct things. And that's not what the animations are about. So it would be a different way again to enjoy these stories.
Okay. We've been going for 2 hours. Sorry about that, lads. I thought it'd take about 90 minutes tops. Audience, thank you so much for such a full-throated involvement with this. The comments have been fantastic, and great to see so many familiar names there. Just a request, if you've enjoyed it, just hit subscribe and ring the bell. All I'm trying to do is grow the YouTube channel to the same sort of levels as the audio channels. If you like, it just seems like a good opportunity to do that. Gavin, Ant, amazing. Thank you so much for your time. Ant, what a great prize you've put up. That's fantastic. So we'll sort that out on Thursday. Just to say to you guys still listening, we've got another couple of these plans. Me and Gav are working on something. Hopefully we can make that happen. And me and Paul are going to do one about rumours and hoaxes, which will be quite fun to do. And we'll pick our favourite ones, and we'll probably mention that guy in Wigan once or twice as well. As I'm not saying it's a hoax. I'm not calling him a hoaxer or a rumorist, but we need to mention that if we're talking about the great rumours of all time. But we'll cover some other stuff as well. So thanks very much, everyone. Absolutely brilliant. And we'll be in touch soon. Okay. Bye.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Yep.